Two. Greetings, everybody. Super Wednesday's here. In the Holy Land, the Holy Apple, the Holy Hilltop, Tal Binyamin. We are on the 14th day of the 8th month, Cheshvan 5782, hoping everybody had a meaningful holiday season. Okay, today's the first part of a two-part series. With God's help, we'll try to keep it between 30 and 40 minutes. For us, relatively, that is short. Okay, with Hashem's help, we have a doozer of a class. May our hearts open, and may this class, as always, be for the sake of heaven, for removing the divine presence from the exile. Today's class is entitled One World Religion, ? One World Government, ? One World Currency, ? Conspiracy Theories, ? We hear on the regular media, social media, we hear many times the concepts that I just mentioned of how there is a movement, a global movement to sort of unify the world under one government, one religion, one digital currency. Question is this all conspiracy theories? Is there any truth to it? Is there any roots to these ideas? And that's what we're going to delve into today. So put on a few seatbelts. With Hashem's help, there's a lot of important information here. Once again, get it out, pass it, share it, whatever the terminology is. Just do it. We don't have any big sponsors here. We start with the Vatican News. Vatican News tells us about the Abrahamic family house in Abu Dhabi to open in 2022. The Abrahamic family house, which encloses a synagogue, a church, and a mosque in a single complex, which is scheduled to be inaugurated in 2022, is 20% complete. The committee said it is inspired by the 2019 document of human fraternity constructed by constructed on Saadiyat Island in Abu Dhabi, the capital of the UAE. The project is closely followed by Pope Francis and the Grand Imam Ahmad el-Tayyab of El-Azhar. Shared values. The Abrahamic family house's design by architect Sir David Adjaye captures the values shared by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam through three main buildings, including a mosque, a church, and a synagogue, all in one place. As such, the complex innovatively recounts the history and builds bridges between human civilizations and heavenly messages. Vatican News goes on. Besides the three places of worship, the site includes a cultural center that aims to encourage people to exemplify human fraternity and solidarity. So we have the three church, mosque, and a synagogue, and then we have a place where all come together, a community culture center. Everyone comes together. In the spirit of the document, the Abrahamic family house complex will welcome all visitors wishing to worship, learn, and engage in dialogue. In addition, it will offer a variety of daily programs and activities and will host international conferences and world summits that feature harmonious coexistence within communities. The complex of the Abrahamic family house will offer the followers of the respective faiths enough space for real peace of mind and soul within an atmosphere in which a spirit of intimacy prevails. Okay, so there will be a spirit of intimacy between the three religions. Okay, anyways, it's very clear here. We see this Abrahamic family house going up, finished next year. And we see the idea, there are the major three religions, and then there's a place where we all come together and meet, intimacy, together, shared values. Sounds very much like the one world religion. Okay, 68 years ago, perhaps the first seeds of what we are seeing today, speeding up the one world government, one world religion, one world digital currency. The seeds, amazingly, in a book called New Age, by Alice Bailey from 1954, Education in the New Age. Anyways, Alice has 13 principles in the book, 68 years ago. Now this is an amazing point. 13 principles. If you are Jewish, that should ring a bell. And if you are not Jewish, it also should ring a bell, because we know that within the world, especially in the UK, especially in America, we have the unlucky number 13. And I'll read a little bit about the unlucky 13. Why is that? Why is there this superstition, or perhaps it's not, of the unlucky 13? Okay, so number one, according to Stress Management Center and Phobia Institute in North Carolina, more than 80% of high-rise buildings in the U.S. do not have a 13th floor. And the vast majority of hotels, hospitals, and airports avoid using the number for rooms and gates as well. Take care, bro. Friday the 13th, okay, Friday the 13th, results in heavy financial losses each year. An excess of $800 million annually as people avoid getting married, traveling, or even working. So we see that with the Gentile world, 13 is a very unlucky 13 as it's called. Why is that? It gives a few reasons here. Let's look at a couple of them. Mathematicians and scientists, meanwhile, point to the number 12, often considered the perfect number in the ancient world. The ancient Sumerians developed numeral systems based on the use of 12 that is still used for measuring time today. Most calendars have 12 months. Single day is comprised of 2 12-hour half-day intervals. Following so closely on the heels of a perfect number 12, some argue that 13 was sure to be found lacking and unusual. In the Bible, Judas Iscariot, the 13th guest to arrive at the Last Supper, is the person who eventually betrays JC. Meanwhile, ancient Norse lore holds that evil and turmoil were first introduced in the world by the appearance of the treacherous and mischievous god Loki at a dinner party in Valhalla. He was the 13th guest, upsetting the balance of the previous 12 gods already in attendance. So we have two sources, quote unquote, from the Bible or from the God period of time, and one from the mathematicians and scientists. Okay, now on the other hand, we know that 13 is the most lofty number in Judaism. We know that when a male is 13 years old, they become obligated to observe the commandments. It's called a bar mitzvah. It's called a bar mitzvah. And not only that, the author of the Tanya writes that what happens on this special day, is a 13-year-old male receives the good inclination. It comes much closer into a person's life at the birthday, the 13th birthday. The good inclination sort of lands and enters and integrates within this birthday boy at the age of 13. Now he has a closer connection to the good inclination. We know that Maimonides came up with 13 principles of faith. We know that the major part of the Yom Kippur, the fast day, the 25-hour fast day, the focus of the fast day is the 13 principles of mercy. We know that the written law is deduced with 13 principles to extract from the written law into the oral law. There are 13 principles. And last but not least at all, we know that we say a few times a day, depending who you are, how many times you say it, but at least we say it twice a day. We say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, one. The word Echad, the numerical value is 13. Aleph, 1, Chet, 8, and Dalet is 4. So it's 13. God is one, so 13. Anyways, that's the beginning. That is the beginning. We will hit a little bit harder on this number 13 because it's really an amazing, and this really just hit me. It was a tremendous present that God gave me about this 13. We'll get to it very shortly. We'll come back to it again. But for right now, let's look into the book of Alice Bailey, 68 years ago, Education in the New Age. You're really going to have to put a, don't eat while we're saying this, you might choke, but this is amazing. Here, I see the seeds, the source, the beginning of what we see today speeding up with the speed of light in one world religion, one world government, one world currency. The children of the future, these are quotes from the book, the children of the future will serve one world government and live in a one world culture. Folks, if you're still sitting down, if you haven't flown out the window through your roof, you're really something, maybe you ate something that's keeping you down. This is on page 6 of that book. Patriotism to one's country must be abolished and all national barriers destroyed in order to build a new one world order. 68 years ago, people like to be looked at as, oh, I'm New Age. That is like really cool. That's really popular. I remember when I was growing up, oh, I'm New Age. Well, let's look, what is New Age? When the young people are civilized, cultured, and responsive to world citizenship, we are today on our way to a far better civilization than the world has ever known, and toward conditions which will ensure a much happier humanity and which will see the end of national differences. If you remember, Karl, the head of the author of the fourth Industrial Revolution, Karl has a hard last name, a German last name, something like Schwab or something. He said that you will own nothing and you will all be happy. So 68 years before that, we see we will have a much happier humanity we will see the end of national differences, and we will all have one world citizenship. We will be citizens of one world. That's on pages, what I read, 47, 48. Next, page 91. World citizenship should be the goal of the enlightened everywhere, and the hallmark of the spiritual man. Teenagers and youth will rebel and revolt against their parents and against authority to help usher in the new age, new world order. It's page 131. Okay, that's really good. Teenagers and youth usually rebel, but now it's even, now we're asking them, please rebel against your parents and against authority. Youth and all of humanity must accept that the time will inevitably come when grown-ups, folks, clear out your ears, take some Q-tips, listen to this. I'm going to start again. Youth and all of humanity must accept that the time will inevitably come when grown-ups who refuse to become part of the new age will have to be eliminated. They are to be considered as lowly germs, an infection or blot on humanity that must be stamped out and eradicated. 131. Amazing. We spoke in the past about different countries around the world that have, in the last couple of years, have come up with laws that are biased against people that are over the age of 70, various operations that if you are in certain countries, if you are over the age of 70, you are not entitled for your life to be saved, and have various operations, surgeries, etc. Next, pages 111 to 112. Let us never forget that when a form of life proves inadequate or too diseased or too crippled, it is from the point of view of the hierarchy no disaster when that form has to go. Got it? If we have people that are inadequate, people that are inadequate, people that are diseased, people that are crippled, people that are limited, it is no disaster that they must go. No time, remember that song? No time for losers, 'cause we are the elite champions of the world. Thank you, Queen. Moving right along, page 112. The traditional family unit is not desirable for the new age. Children belong to the government. It's happening today in...
Kibbutz did that.
Right, they're citizens of the kibbutz?
No, the children homes in the kibbutz.
Right. Yeah, many years ago. Right, but today I was listening to a program recently about school boards all over the United States are beginning to try to pass laws against parents' interference and having the children belong to the government. So this is happening right today, 68 years later. Children belong to the government, to the world, and to their communities, not to their parents. A new kind of family unit must inevitably come into existence. Thank you. Absurd. This is on 137. Absurd and immature notions such as sin and guilt must not be imparted to children by parents, teachers, religious leaders, and other adults. A more permissive and worldly attitude must be adopted. No sin, no guilt, whatever you want. Everything is beautiful. Live and let live. Children are to be taught that all religions are equally worthwhile and that it doesn't matter in which God one believes. Everything's the same. There are tens of thousands of religions, and they're all the same. It doesn't matter. Children will be taught in this one world government, in the one world religion, that doesn't matter in which God one believes. The children of different nations will be taught truth without bias or prejudice. The idea of one humanity will take the place of religion. Page 88. The new generation of youth must recognize that JC did not come to save or convert anyone, because no one is lost. Remember that old-time Jewish bumper sticker, "We never lost it"? We never lost it. The Christians came out with a bumper sticker. It's "We found it." And then the Jews smartly came up with "We never lost it." But now, the new age, the new one world order here, the youth will be taught that no religion can save you, or no one's coming to convert you, because everyone is equal. Doctrines such as heaven, hell, and judgment must be discarded. And the theology of the Old Testament must be repudiated. Repudiated. Yep, got to get rid of that. And there was once that song, "Give me that old-time religion." Now it's "Get rid of that old-time religion." Must be repudiated. There we go. Okay, moving right along. We are also visioning a new and vital one world religion, a universal faith. This is on page 149. The coming New Age world religion will emphasize the unity of all religions. Page 149. Okay, very clear. The seeds were planted. They have been planted by Alice Bailey. Is there something more Jewish or spiritual about this agenda of one world religion, one world government, one world currency, digital? Is there anything behind that of truth? Or, as we said, is it all conspiracy theory? We're seeing a lot of material so far that it doesn't seem like a conspiracy theory at all. But let's go higher. Let's try to go higher. By many, Jews and non-Jews included, and sometimes even perhaps scholars, Sukkot, the feast, the festival of the tabernacles, or the Feast of the Tabernacles, they call it in English, Sukkot, is considered by many a universal holiday. Why is that? Well, if we delve into the sources, we could see a lot of arrows pointing to that conclusion, seemingly. Let's start. Number one, the only Jewish holiday during the year that relates to the non-Jewish community is the holiday of Sukkot, none other. On Sukkot, the Jewish people bring 70 bulls to the temple. In the tractate Sukkot, page 55b, it states there the reason why we bring 70 bulls is to sacrifice for the 70 nations. Even though today the UN has 130 somewhat nations, there are really 70 heads of nations. So we see, very interesting, there is some point of universal getting together that's happening on the Sukkot holiday. 70 bulls for the 70 nations. Number 2, we know that the prophet Zechariah, in chapter 14, verse 16, the prophet Zechariah writes that those nations that do not come up to Jerusalem on the holiday of Sukkot will be plagued by plagues, and also they will have no rain that coming year. So that's a pretty heavy curse. Nations that do not come up to Jerusalem when? Not on Passover, not on Shavuot, on the holiday of Sukkot. We have nations coming up to Jerusalem on the holiday of Sukkot. We see sort of this prophecy, quote unquote, we see tongue-in-cheek. Every year, what started out as a Jewish parade of the army in 1953, the army began a 3-day, or some say 5-day hike to Jerusalem to arrive on the holiday of Sukkot. This started in 1953, then it went down to 3 days, and then it went down to 1 day, and then it just became a march on Sukkot. In the year 2003, the march was hijacked by the Christian embassy of Jerusalem, where thousands of Christians from all over the world ascend to Jerusalem for this parade, blocking streets and going through the streets of Jerusalem in order to, quote unquote, fulfill this prophecy. You see, we are ascending to Jerusalem on Sukkot, therefore let it rain, therefore have no plagues on our heads. So, very interesting. The Christians have decided to take hostage the Jerusalem Sukkot march. Okay, now also we know that Rabbi Hai Gaon, the last head master of the yeshiva in Babylonia, in a place called Pumbedita, he lived approximately 1100 years ago. He writes, and it's brought down in the Code of Jewish Law, that he has a tradition from his rabbis, so this goes even further back than 1100 years, that the battle between the 70 nations and the Jewish people in Jerusalem, over Jerusalem, the battle over Jerusalem will take place on the holiday, during the holiday of Sukkot, and that is why the Jewish people, on the first day of Sukkot and on the Sabbath of the intermediate days of Sukkot, we read from the prophet Ezekiel, which we read about this war, this coming war between the Jewish people and all the nations of the world. That will take place on Sukkot. Once again, there is something universal. There is something that is either bonding us or separating us, but after coming together. There is definitely a coming together, a showdown between the Jewish people and the nations of the world. There is a meeting that is taking place on the holiday of Sukkot. Does that mean a new one world religion? How does that play out? Does it mean unite, but then to be destroyed, the nations of the world? Let's look further. Last but not least, we have a verse that one might say is prophetic for the holiday of Sukkot. It is a verse in Isaiah 56, chapter 56, verse 7. Isaiah says that there will come a day that my house in Jerusalem will be a house of all nations. It will be a house of prayer for all the nations. Now, maybe this is the new one world religion. My house, the temple in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, will be a house of prayer for all nations. Okay, now let's take this from the top. Let's take it from the top. As we mentioned before, 70 bulls are brought to the temple, connected to the 70 nations of the world. Now, question is, we understand that the 70 bulls represent the 70 nations. Is the sacrifice of the bull, is that detrimental to the nations of the world or beneficial? And this, we have a dispute amongst our sages. We have opinions on both sides. And then after we see both sides, then we will put the two sides together and unify them. And we will see really that there is no dispute. Okay, so number one, this statement of the 70 bulls connected to the 70 nations brought for the 70 nations. This is said by Rabbi Elazar in Tractate Sukkot 55b. According to Rabbi Yochanan says on the same page, he says that the nations of the world, if they only knew what they are missing since they destroyed the temple, they would have never destroyed it. We see very clearly, according to Rabbi Yochanan's opinion in the Talmud, that these 70 bulls are for the benefit of the nations of the world. Rashi, once again, Tractate Sukkot 55b, Rashi says that these 70 bulls are brought in order that the nations of the world will have rain for the upcoming year. Beneficial, according to Rashi. According to our sages in Shir HaShirim Rabbah, chapter 1, paragraph 63, it says there that the 70 bulls are an atonement for the 70 nations. What's better than that? Atonement for their sins. So we see one side of the spectrum. However, there's another side of the spectrum that come and say that the 70 bulls are detrimental, are a symbol of the downfall of the nations. Number one, Rashi. Ironically, even though we quoted Rashi on the Talmud, that Rashi says the reason why we bring the 70 bulls is in order that there should be rain for the upcoming year, so that there should be food and water for the nations and health. The same Rashi, on his commentary on the 5 books of Moses, in Numbers chapter 29, verse 18, on the second day of Sukkot, listen closely. The way that the 70 bulls are divided is not 10, 10, 10, 7 days, 10 times 7, 70. No, the first day, 13. Ooh, sounds familiar, that number. Okay, and I told you we'd get back to it. The first day of Sukkot, we bring 13 bulls to sacrifice for the nations. Second day of Sukkot, we bring 12. On the second day of Sukkot, because there's a change in the number of bulls that are brought to the temple. Rashi on the second day of Sukkot comments, what's going on here? If we look in all of the Torah, and we look at all the holidays, and we always notice that the sacrifices are stable, are static. For example, we bring 14 sheep every single day for the Jewish people on Sukkot. 14, 7 days, that's 98. It doesn't change. The amount of sheep that we bring is 14 straight down the line. Or rams, we bring every single day 2 rams to the temple on Sukkot. 7 days of Sukkot, 2 rams, 14. And we're not talking, of course, about the Los Angeles rams, so don't be confused. So Rashi says, Rashi who looks, he's the commentator on all of the Torah, he sees this. This is the first time that there is ever a change in the number of the sacrifices. Now, on Passover, why don't we say a full praise Hallel? We only say it on the first day. And it says in the tractate of Erchin, page 10, it says that very simply, because if you look at the 7 days of Passover, there's never a change in the sacrifice. It's the same sacrifice. So therefore, if there's no change, there's no excitement. How does a human being become excited? We become excited when we do something different, when we have different experiences, new experience. We buy something new. You ever notice you ask your wife what she'd like for a present? She said like a new dress. But when you open up her closet, there's like 150 dresses there. Like, what's going on, woman? You have 150 dresses? No, you don't understand. She needs a new dress. 151. Okay, so we see the first time in history a change, a decline. Now, this is unusual decline because everyone out there knows that we have a principle in Judaism. We go up in holiness. We don't go down. People ask me, are you going down to your yeshiva? I say, I'm never going down. I'm always going up to my yeshiva. I try to always go up. We don't go down. So folks, not only is there a change, but it's the change for the worse. It's a decline. So Rashi says the following. Why is there a decline? This is a prophetic future of the nations. As history proceeds, the nations decline, and in the end, except for the righteous, those that do the 7 commandments of Noah, except for the righteous Gentiles, they're gone. That is the words of Rashi, klaya, destruction. That is where they're heading. And we receive this sign on the holiday of Sukkot, where the bulls, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, on the last day of Sukkot, we have 7. This decline is showing us that as history proceeds and goes forward, the strength of the nations weaken. Okay, now, this is really amazing. Folks, if you came to this world just to hear this, this is really amazing. Comes the Gra. Here comes the Gra. Okay, the Gra tells us in Tikkun, based on Tikkunei Zohar, the 13th Tikkun, page 30. The Gra, commentating on the Tikkunei Zohar, says the following, that the pinnacle, the pedestal of the fall, of the destruction of the nations of the world, once again, those that are evil, those that do not accept and perform the 7 commandments of Noah. The pinnacle of their downfall is when? Which day of Sukkot? The first day. Why? Because the Tikkunei Zohar says that we have a special letter. The letter is Vav. The letter Vav is the sixth letter in the Jewish alphabet. Now, the letter Vav means two things. Number one, it's number sixth letter, so it's the holy Kabbalistic sphere of Yesod, of foundation, of modesty. Now, it also, if you spell out the letter Vav, it spelled Vav, and then an Aleph, and then a Vav. That spells out Vav. Just like if I wanted to spell out the letter Aleph, I use an Aleph, Lamed, Pei. Aleph, Vav. So if you check the numerical value of the letter Vav, it comes out to 13. You have two Vavs, 12. Aleph in the middle, you have 13. So this foundation, or the shaking, the uprooting foundation of the nations occurs according to the Gra on the first day of the holiday of Sukkot. Now we understand. This is an amazing concept. All over the world, the nations are afraid of the unlucky 13. And we said, according to the Jews, this is a great letter. This is a great number. Judaism is based on 13. But according to the nations of the world, why do they hate? Why do 80% of hospitals and airports and high-rises, they don't have a 13th floor? What are they afraid of that number? They have a damn right to be afraid of that number. Because according to the Gra, their downfall, the pinnacle of the downfall occurs on the first day of Sukkot when we bring how many? 13 bulls to the temple. That is the pinnacle of their downfall. And once again, the Gentiles are especially afraid of Friday the 13th. Well, Friday is the sixth day of the week. And we said Vav, which represents the foundation and spiritual sexual purity. This is the sixth letter. So Friday, the sixth day, and Vav is the sixth letter, and we said Vav spelled out is 13. So you have a double whammy. You also have Friday, which is connected to Vav, and when you spell out the letter Vav, you come up with 13, Friday the 13th. That's why they're so terrified of Friday the 13th. And that's why it's an unlucky number. So everything we read before about why it's unlucky according to scientists, mathematicians, throw it in the garbage. Now you know the real reason. Okay, going on, and we'll stand here for the first class. Okay, we have more sources that point that the bringing of 70 bulls to the temple is to the detrimental of the nations. We have Lekach Tov on the portion of Pinchas, page 131. Nations are declining and heading to become oblivion, unlike Israel, who are eternal. Straight out. In the Midrash Agadah, the portion of Pinchas, chapter 28, it says 70 bulls are brought on Sukkot every year to save the Jewish people from the 70 nations. The finish of the nations is represented by the decline of the number. That's in Midrash Agadah. So the 70 bulls are to save the Jewish people. They're not for the benefit of the nations, they're to benefit the Jewish people. And it also is a sign of the decline and destruction of the evil nations. Last but not least, in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, on the 28th Perek, and also if you look in Rashi on Genesis chapter 15, verse 9, this is an amazing that we're having this class. Today is Wednesday here. 4 days ago, all over the world, the Jewish people read the Torah portion of Lech Lecha. And we talk about the covenant of the parts. In Hebrew, we called it Brit Ben Abetarim. And in this covenant, first of all, once a year, the army in Israel allows a group of Jews, yeshiva people, they are allowed to go up to past the Hermon on a mountain called Har Dov, where there is a tradition that is exactly where it's in Lebanon. There is a tradition that is where God made a covenant with Abraham called the covenant of the parts. And there was just a gigantic celebration. There were a few hundred people allowed up this past week, because we read in the portion of Lech Lecha, we read about this covenant that God makes, where he tells us that on one hand there will be 4 exiles, on the other hand he tells us that we will inherit the land of Israel, and we will see the connection. Anyways, listen to this. Just to understand this, before we get into what Rashi says, an amazing commentary based on Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, chapter 28. Abraham was commanded to take 3, according to most opinion, 3 animals of different types. 3 calves, 3 goats, 3 rams, and turtle dove, and a regular dove. These 5 types of animals, rams and calves and goats, and the turtle dove and the dove, they were to be chopped in half. There was also a bird was brought, and nothing happened to the bird. Rashi brings down this source of the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, amazing. He says the same concept as what we just talked about the 70 bulls. Why are they declining? This is a sign that their end is close. Their end is near. And when does this happen? It happens on Sukkot, holiday of Sukkot. Amazing. So Rashi brings down that, what does this come to teach us? It comes to teach us, you know why the 5 animals were cut? The calf, the ram, and the ram and the goat, and the turtle dove and the dove. Why were they chopped? Because they represent 5 exiles of the Jewish people. One of them happens to be the Arab, the Muslim, the Ishmael exile, added to the list here. And we have many sources that say the dove is connected to Ishmael, the exile of the Muslims. So this is a sign that they are heading to abyss. The nations of the world, the evil, they are heading to the abyss. And only the Jewish people who represent that bird who is not touched, that represents the Jewish people who are here for eternity. So, one last. The Olelot Ephraim, he has a commentary, besides for his book, Olelot Ephraim. It's in the chapter 28. But he also has a commentary on the Torah called Kli Yakar, who all of us should be familiar with. Anyways, in his book, Olelot Ephraim, chapter 27, he says an amazing connection. Listen to this. He says, you know when the Jewish people are going to inherit the land of Israel? Look at this covenant between Abraham and God. As we spoke about a couple of minutes ago, there are 2 levels of this covenant. One is the downfall of the Jewish people, suffering exile. God tells Abraham, your descendants will be slaves in a land not theirs for 400 years. But it also tells us about our receiving the inheritance. At the same moment, God tells Abraham about the receiving of the inheritance of the land of Israel. And beautifully, the Olelot Ephraim connects the 2. You know when the Jewish people are going to inherit the land of Israel? When the nations fall. When the subjugating nations fall, which is amazing. because we talked about the exile of the Muslims. When did we take back the land of Israel? When did we redeem and liberate the land of Israel? We liberated from the hands of the Muslims, of the Arab nations, an exact prophetic to what Ololot Ephraim. When you see the fall of subjugation, of the subjugators, and that's when the Jewish people will retake the land of Israel. We have seen it. Okay, so just to summarize here so far, we've seen two schools of thought. One positive and one negative. 70 bulls are for the benefit of the nations of the world. That's one school of thought. On the other hand, we see another school of thought that the 70 bulls that are brought in a sequence of events that are on a decline, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. This is a symbol, this is a message to the evil nations of the world that as history proceeds, the nations of the world come closer to being obliterated. Stay tuned for next week, God willing, when we finish.